Welcome to the first lecture on rhetorical analysis. We'll have another lecture on rhetorical analysis, but this is the one that will correspond to the reading that you should have reviewed in the textbook section to the student. So just to review the important terms, the important rhetorical concepts, rhetoric is the study of communication, especially argumentation for our purposes in this class. And there are three rhetorical appeals that you might have heard of before, but if you haven't, it's okay. Even though they have funny Latin names, they will be pretty easily understandable to you. You just need to try to get them straight if you use them in your analysis. So the three rhetorical appeals are ethos, pathos, and logos. And these correspond actually to the rhetorical triangle that I introduced on the first day, or the first lecture of class. So, you can see here the rhetorical triangle, but I've edited it somewhat. It started out by just showing the relationship between text, author, and audience. Again, it's important that you realize whenever you have a text and you're reading it or analyzing it, it has an author and it also has an audience. In rhetoric, we always keep our mind on the fact that there's an audience for a text the author had in mind, or maybe even didn't have in mind, but they're going to read it or hear it a little bit differently. So the three rhetorical appeals of ethos, pathos, and logos they kind of fit neatly onto this rhetorical triangle. Ethos means the appeal to the credibility of the author. So of course, this easily fits onto the author point of the triangle. This is how the author of the text tries to enhance their credibility by writing in a certain way, by citing certain research, by an academic text really trying to appear reasonable. Pathos is the appeal to emotion. It sounds kind of like words for pathetic or empathy or sympathy, words like relating to emotion and caring. So pathos, the appeal to pathos is when the author tries to appeal to the emotions of the reader, which could be through fear or pride or anger. Of course, we don't see this a whole lot in academic texts because the author tries to appear reasonable. But the pathos appeal fits pretty neatly onto the audience point of the triangle because those emotions are really being hopefully stirred up in the audience. The third appeal is logos, the appeal to logic, and we can fit that onto the text point of the rhetorical triangle. This is about the way that the text is structured, the logical argument of the text, what is included in the text, so it's very focused on the actual article. Within the text point of the rhetorical triangle, it leads naturally into some other of the rhetorical terms that are further along in your textbook. So we've talked about the aspects of the rhetorical situation, the author, audience, and text. And so the textbook says the text part of the rhetorical situation gives you the other important elements, which are purpose, structure, and research. Now, purpose is pretty obvious. It can include the thesis or the hypothesis of the text. It's the reason that the author has created and written the text. And so you need to try to figure that out whenever you're looking at something, whether it's a verbal or a visual text, which we'll look at in just a minute. The structure refers to the way that the piece is put together. So how is it arranged? How is it formatted? What comes first, second, third, last? This functions pretty differently between a visual text and a verbal text because obviously a verbal has a beginning and an end. A visual text has more foreground and background, or reading it from top to bottom or left to right or whatever it may be. The research is the evidence that's used to support the author's argument, and you're probably familiar with how this looks in an academic verbal text. It will often have parentheses and citations. It will be citing studies. It might refer to things that people have said, and then there'll be a list of citations at the end of that article. But you can also find these kinds of details to support, the visual details to support an argument in a visual text, which we'll look at in just a second. So, just to review, it might help you understand and remember what these important rhetorical concepts are. If you think about the rhetorical triangle, that originally we talked about this as having pointing to a text, an author, and an audience. But if we think of the three rhetorical appeals that have those funny Latin names, they can map on pretty easily to the points on that triangle. The text point can refer to logos, the appeal to logic, the way that the text is put together. And then a subset of that can be purpose, structure, and research. But then the other 2 points of the triangle include audience, and the author might try to stir up feelings in the audience to get them to believe them more. And another way that the author tries to get their point across and be believed is through bolstering their ethos, which is, in a verbal text, the way that you write, the kind of disposition you seem to have, the amount of research that you've done, how informed you are, things like that. So we'll keep those terms in mind. We'll be practicing rhetorical analysis on visual text right now, and you can have some fun with finding your own visual text and doing a beginning of a rhetorical analysis for this unit. Then we'll move into talking about rhetorical analysis in a fuller, more contextual way in the next lecture. This is leading into your rhetorical analysis paper. So let's try these rhetorical terms out. We have a visual text here. This is an older ad for Honda motorcycles. So the author, pretty straightforward, it's going to be Honda, or at least the firm hired by Honda to make this ad. The audience, we could find out more if we research the context of this ad, which it appears to be a magazine ad, so where did it appear? You might say generally, just because it's a motorcycle ad, it appeals or is meant to reach an audience of people who are open to buying a motorcycle. Maybe they're shopping for some kind of different vehicle, or maybe they don't know that they want a motorcycle, but this ad is going to try to stir up feelings in them to buy a motorcycle, and if they do, to make it a Honda motorcycle. Okay, so then let's look more closely at the text itself. So if we think about structure first, you can see that it's definitely an image. There's a background of mountains and maybe a small town or just some wilderness behind the writers. So it shows that they are definitely not in the city, and that goes along with the text, no city limits. It's easy to get outside of the city and have this adventure if you have a motorcycle. Also, they're on an unpaved road. So these are all visual details that reinforce part of the author's purpose of saying, you should get out of the city, you should do it on a Honda motorcycle. So it looks like they're out of the city based on the background, and in the foreground, the part that's closest to the camera or the viewer, you have an unpaved road. Also, part of the structure is that these people are going somewhere. They are on a road, they are headed, you've kind of caught them in a snapshot. They were moving from one side of the frame to the other, and a photographer supposedly has caught them in motion as they're traveling outside the city limits. Now, research can be hard when talking about this kind of image, but we do have evidence which is related to research, and it's visual evidence. The evidence that Honda motorcycles are good is that they are upright, people are riding them, there's no smoke coming out of the back, these people appear to be having fun, they care about safety, so this reinforces a message that Honda motorcycles are good because they can be safe for you. The visual detail that serves as evidence is that the riders are both wearing helmets. So if you take all of this together, we've talked about the way the text is arranged and what the purpose is. We can talk also about the three rhetorical appeals and the other two that we haven't looked at so far. So the logos is really about what I've just been discussing, the structure, the arrangement, the evidence that this author gives. So let's talk about the author. I mentioned that it's probably some kind of advertising firm or PR firm, but it's on behalf of Honda. So if we think of Honda as the author, what is their ethos? Authors always have some kind of ethos they're trying to create and bring across to the reader. So you have to think about this a little bit abstractly, but you can find evidence for the type of ethos that this author, Honda, is trying to create and bring across to the reader. This is a pretty high quality image, especially this is from, I'm not sure when, but maybe the 70s or 80s. And so it's in color, it's not in black and white. You can think about these as choices, or technical choices that the author has made. So it's a color photograph, it's a photograph and not a drawing, so it portrays real life. It's not fantasy. It's a pretty high quality photograph. It's not incredibly blurry. It looks like it was taken with a good camera. The text is arranged skillfully. It's not just kind of haphazardly appearing on the page. It was clearly laid out by someone who knew what they were doing. So if you think of the author as the person creating this image, they made certain choices to communicate, we have lots of money at our disposal, we're a large corporation, we want to present a very clear image that you can understand quickly. And in the audience, you'll think about the readers who have encountered this ad back at some point, maybe 70s or 80s, just judging from the quality of it. People who probably read the kind of magazine that this was published in. And let's think about the feelings or the values of that audience. And so this is the appeal to pathos that we've talked about. It's going to be someone who cares about safety, as I mentioned, because the people are wearing helmets. And the people, they don't appear to be riding recklessly, but kind of responsibly. They're keeping on the road, they're not off-roading. They probably also care about freedom because they're getting outside of the city limits. They don't want to be constrained in the city. It's not a photograph that was taken inside a city navigating city roads and city traffic. They're out in the country, which we talked about, we know, because there's a paved road and there's a picture behind them that shows they're kind of in the mountains. So the audience, I think we can surmise from this photo, they care about safety and freedom. And then if we read the text more closely, it would be giving us verbal reasons for why they should particularly consider Honda motorcycles if and when they consider buying a motorcycle. So let's look at the next slide. This is a little bit closer to our own age and a product that more of us understand. So if we're thinking about the structure of this ad, it's pretty easy to see that it's in 3 parts. There's a part on the left, which is a hand being held up in the air in front of a busy city scene. And the hand is messy because there's writing all over it. That's on the left. On the right, you have a single device. It looks like a smartphone or some kind of digital device to organize your life. And I got that tagline from the third part, which is the part down on the bottom. It gives the name of the product, which is Palm. So that's the structure. The evidence that kind of corresponds to research, again, that the author of this ad is giving is that life can be chaos if you're just making notes on your hand. I used to do this before I had a smartphone. If I needed to remember something, I would actually write it here. This was like an impromptu notepad. And sometimes it could get very messy if I was writing several messages, crossing them out. It just didn't look very professional. So that's what this person has done. They've made messages to themselves on their hand, and that looks cluttered. Also, the city scene behind them kind of communicates that it's busy, it's kind of chaotic, and the word chaos appears at the top of that left-hand part of the ad. If you notice down at the bottom, it says, buy Palm. Like this person can't keep track of all these notes. They need something more organized and that looks better and cleaner. So on the right side, you have the little device itself, which is saying order. The background is very clean, so that's how we know it's trying to communicate a message that your life will be cleaner and more orderly if you buy this device. So I've demonstrated how you can actually do a rhetorical analysis using the terms from our textbook on a visual text, and that will hopefully get you in the habit and give you some more information about what these terms mean, because a visual text is trying to communicate something and persuade you of something, especially if it's an ad, in just the same way that a verbal text does. And in this class, we want you to think about each academic article that you read as trying to persuade you of something. The author has an argument Their purpose is to inform, but also to persuade you that their research is important, that it was conducted well, that they found what they said they found, but also give you lots of information along the way. So what I'd like for you to do next is to go out and find your own image. It could be an ad, it could be a political cartoon, and I'm going to talk about that one in the next lecture, because context is really important to understand a political cartoon, and we'll be talking more about context in the next lecture. So go find an image. Google image search is really helpful for these. You can just type in advertisement and it gives you some sections, like Nike has a lot that you could use, technology ads. It can be any kind of magazine ad for something that you're familiar with, or even an ad online. It doesn't have to be a magazine ad. Those just usually have more detail. So select that, post it in the discussion board, and start making some notes, that doesn't have to be in full sentences, about ways that you would apply those terms to these visual texts. So this can be a little bit more fun and a little bit more accessible because the organization is all on one page. You don't have to read multiple pages of text. So this is a fun way to start out doing rhetorical analysis, but after the next couple of lectures, we will start on analyzing a verbal text, which is going to be the Kellogg article. So I hope you're going to enjoy doing rhetorical analysis as much as I do. I think it can be fun, and it can really influence the way that you view the world, especially texts in the world. And so our next major project is going to be rhetorically analyzing an academic article in your field. So that's where we're moving, but start out slowly and more casually with finding a visual text and starting to analyze in just notation form 3 terms about the way that this rhetorical situation functions in the visual text that you select.